everyone, welcome back. I am Allison. I am a school librarian living and working in Austria, and I am so excited to be talking to you again today. As you can see, we are joined by Molly, who is determined to be a little kitty weirdo as per usual. So anyway, I am participating in middle grade March this year. I have been wanting to read more middle grade for a while because, you know, I work with middle school students and it's always good to be on top of the latest middle grade titles, but I always feel like each year, even though there are so many that I want to read, I don't always get to them. So I decided to make one of my reading goals this year, which I know I didn't talk about here on YouTube, but I did write about on my blog, so I will leave a link to that post down in the description box if you want to know my other goals. One of my goals this year is to read more middle grade. I decided that I was going to devote a month to reading just middle grade books, and then I found out that there was a whole middle grade March thing here on YouTube, so I decided why not jump on that bandwagon. I will leave links to the hosts' videos down below in case you want to know more about middle grade March as well. But I've been watching videos from the hosts and other people participating in middle grade March and talking about middle grade books that they like, and I was noticing that a lot of my favorite middle grade books were not really mentioned, so I thought that I would do a video just talking about the middle grade books that are near and dear to my heart, in case anyone else is still looking for books that they want to pick up this month, or, you know, whenever, because no one said you have to just read middle grade books in March. So this is probably going to be a little bit rambly. Please excuse any background noise that you can hear. I am not sure what my cats are up to, but whatever it is always seems to involve making a fair amount of noise. So again, I apologize for whatever it is they are doing, and I hope that it's not too distracting. Anyway, this is not like scientifically done in any way. I sat down and I wrote down all of the middle grade books that came to my mind when I thought of ones that I really loved, and it's a pretty big list. I will say that some of them I read a while ago, so I might not have, like, there's a pigeon on my balcony, if you're wondering what inspired that really long meow. Living with cats is a joy, always. So some of these I did read a really long time ago. I may not have a great description of it. Like I said, I'm just gonna tell you my favorites, maybe talk a little bit about them. I hope that it gives you inspiration for things you might want to read. And because I am extra and cannot limit myself, there are 25 books, so I'm not gonna talk too much about them because otherwise this video would be a million years long and no one wants that. So let's get into the books, accompanied by Molly's chattering at the pigeon. The first book I want to talk about is actually a series of 5 books, the Vanderbeakers series by Karina Young-Glaser. The first one is The Vanderbeakers of 141st Street. This whole series is very near and dear to my heart because it is set in the neighborhood that I lived in when I lived in New York City. And it just makes me so happy to, like, read about landmarks that I would walk by on a regular basis. But aside from that, like, I just really love the family, and I like, honestly, you can't always say this for a series, but I felt that each book got better than the last one, and I just love them all. There's not a bad book in the series. But in the first book, the family, the Vanderbeakers, get notice from their landlord right before Christmas that they're going to be, he's not renewing their lease and they need to leave their apartment at the end of December, which is like less than 2 weeks away. And they have no idea why this is happening. This sort of came out of nowhere. And it's the only home they've ever known. So of course they spring into action because they want to be able to stay there, and they create these petitions to get their neighbors to sign and say like why they're such good residents of the neighborhood and the building. And like they come up with gifts to give the landlord and ways to make him less grouchy. And of course, many of these things, because they are kid created, wind up being a little bit of a disaster. So it's just super funny. I love the relationship between the family. I love their pets. It's all so wonderful. So if you haven't picked up the Vanderbeakers series, I'm not sure why, but you should, like, immediately. And the next book that I want to talk about is one that's gotten a lot of buzz in the past year since it came out, and deservedly so, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Halston. This is not a lesser known book, and I understand that, but it absolutely was one of my favorites that I read last year, and one of my favorite fantasy books that I've ever read. Like, honestly, I feel perfectly comfortable recommending this to anyone in place of Harry Potter. That's how great I found it. And it is sort of in that same vein of a kid goes to a magical school. In this case, it's a little bit different. These students are sort of training to be like the magical version of the FBI. It's an interesting concept. And the main character, Amari, finds out about this because her brother actually ended up going to the school, and now her brother has disappeared, but before doing so, he left her this like briefcase, I think, that sort of helps her end up at this school. But it turns out that most of the kids at the school are sort of legacies whose families have known about it forever, and she's like going in at a disadvantage, not to mention that she not only needs to like earn her place at the school, but also figure out what happened to her brother. So it's full of action, it's a unique concept, it's just really wonderful. Moving on, because I said I wasn't going to talk too much about each of the books, and I'm already like failing at that. Okay, The Penderwicks by Jean Birdsall. This is another 5-book series. I think the first one is just called The Penderwicks, but I can't remember. The other ones have like the Penderwicks in Spring, the Penderwicks on Garden Street, but I'm pretty sure the first one is just the Penderwicks. And this is another contemporary novel focusing on sisters. I have heard it compared to Little Women and sort of like being a retelling of Little Women, but I didn't really interpret it as that. But I did really love the sisterly relationships. They were wonderful. And in the first book, they are going away to like a summer home in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and they meet a couple of important people who live there. And the first is the son of the woman who owns like the main house and the whole like estate, and the other one is like the groundskeeper caretaker of the estate. And both of those characters become very important to the Penderwicks and their journey and their adventures at this place. And so it's about their summer there, but it's also a lot about like the sisters' relationships and their relationships with these other characters. And again, I don't want to say much more, but I really love this first book. I think that the rest of the series is great too. The books came out kind of spaced far apart, and so like the characters do age up and sort of a new generation of characters become the focus to keep it in that sort of middle grade arena, and I thought that that was really interesting too. So again, I wholeheartedly recommend the whole series. The next book I want to talk about is The Season of Styx, Malone by Kekla Magoon, and I honestly feel like this should get so much more attention than it does because it is hilarious and I loved it so much. So the main character, so it's actually, you would think the main character would be Styx Malone because that's the name in the title, but there are 2 brothers who are sort of the main characters in this book, and they start off the book by trading away their baby sister for some fireworks, and of course when their parents find out, there is punishment. no one yet seems to know about the contraband fireworks. And so in an effort to sort of keep their parents in the dark about that and get rid of them before they get in even more trouble, they encounter Styx Malone, who is a teenager who lives in their neighborhood. And Styx Malone teaches them about this concept called an escalator trade, where you take something and you trade it for something else that's like slightly higher value, and you keep doing this until you get whatever you really want, which is like a super high value. And what they really want is like a scooter or a motorbike or something like that. And the main character of this book really wants to be able to like travel and experience new places. His dad is kind of super overprotective and they never go anywhere. So like he is super on board with this. And of course the two middle grade brothers, again, I'm sorry, I don't remember their names. They like have a lot of hero worship for Styx because, you know, he's a teenage boy and they look up to him and he's really cool. But like as the summer goes on, like they're not sure that all the choices that Styx Malone is making are really great, and they sort of have to make some tough decisions related to that. And it's a really great book. The ending is surprising. I honestly thought for a second that it was going to be sort of sad and tragic, and it wasn't, and I was really glad about that. So thank you, Kek Lagoon, for not making me cry. It's a really interesting concept. It's a really good book. It's not like super action-packed, but it will keep you reading and turning the pages. And I have said enough. I need to move on to the next book, which is The Serpent Secret by Saintani Dasgupta. And, okay, so for a really long time, when people talked about like the voice in a novel, I never really understood what was meant by that until I read some books with like really strong, really distinct voices. And this is one of those books where the main character just has such a great voice that it's something you haven't seen before in a book and you just want to keep reading, and it's just so wonderful. This is a fantasy book, and the main character in this book comes home one day to find that her parents are gone. And then this like series of things happens really quickly. There's a demon, and then these two guys show up and they help her like fight the demon, and then they tell her that her parents have been taken. She's really like, I don't know, like a princess of the underworld or something. I can't remember exactly, but basically this story that her parents have told her whole life that she thought was a fairy tale is actually true. Now her parents have been taken by a demon, and she has to go with these two guys who are like princes to rescue them. And so it's got a quest element to it. So if you are a fan of any of the Rick Riordan books or Rick Riordan Presents books, I feel like this is a really good read-alike for that. But like I said, the voice is what sets it apart. Her voice is just so unique, and I loved it so much. It's super funny in addition to all of the action. So again, if you haven't read The Serpent Secret, I definitely recommend it, and it's a series. So I actually haven't read the books after it. I'm really bad at keeping up with series, but maybe during middle grade March I will get to one of them. Okay, next up is Lupe Wong, Won't Dance, and I think the author's name is Donna Barba Higuera, but again, I don't remember, and if I'm wrong, I will have the book cover up here so you can see the author, and then I also preemptively apologize if I'm wrong and gave credit to the wrong person for writing this book. And this is another one with just such a strong voice. So Lupe Wong is Chinese and Mexican, biracial, and she doesn't know anyone else who is this combination of races except for a pitcher on her local Major League Baseball team. And her uncle has basically promised her that she can meet this pitcher as long as she gets straight A's during the term that she's in at school. And like, she's worked super hard to do this, and then she finds out that in gym class they're not doing like baseball or soccer or something that she's actually really good at because she's super athletic, but in fact they're doing a square dancing unit. And she has a lot of issues with this. First, because she thinks it will stop her from getting straight A's. Second, because she doesn't want to dance. Third, she, in her quest to get this like off the curriculum, she finds out that square dancing is actually like problematic and racist. Or like the songs they use are problematic and racist, I think. So, you know, it's a lot of like headstrong tween trying to do things and like them blowing up in her face, and that part is funny. But there's also like the serious undertone of why do we keep these traditions even when we know they're problematic? And it's always nice to read a book about a female athlete, because I feel like when we're talking about sports books, often the main characters are boys. Not always, but a lot of times. So, Lupe, Wong, Won't Dance, definitely recommend. Moving on to the next book. You will notice a trend, which is that the majority of these books are, in fact, contemporary books, because that is what I tend to read the most of, with like a sprinkling of fantasy. But I feel like a lot of these contemporaries are not talked about that much when we talk about middle grade books. So I hope that even though they dominate this video, they are still new to you and give you some good recommendations. And on that note, the next one is Amari Reyes Does Not Live in a Castle. It is by Hilda Eunice Burgos, I believe. And it is another book set in New York City, which I love. And Amari Reyes has a big family living in a small apartment in Washington Heights, and she is like a really talented piano player, and she really wants to go to this sort of more elite private school, and to do so she needs to audition, and all she wants is like the time and the privacy to practice the piano. And this is kind of hard because, like I said, a big family, small apartment, there's already I think 5 of them, the parents, and then she has 2 siblings, and then at the beginning of the book she finds out her mom is pregnant and there's going to be another baby. But also her parents are always helping their neighbors and other people in the neighborhood, and so people are constantly stopping by, and it just feels like Anna can never like get a minute to herself, and she really needs this. But as the book goes on, she sort of realizes the benefits of like this close-knit community and family, and sort of works on the balance between like her individual wants and needs of getting into the school and having time for piano, and also like being a part of a close-knit family and community. And it's also really funny. Next is another one that probably will not be a surprise because it's another pretty popular one, and that is Front Desk by Kelly Yang. Again, I just think Mia is such a great character that it's impossible to leave this book off the list, even though I know it's been a pretty popular middle grade book. So Mia and her family in the first book in this trilogy, Front Desk, end up getting jobs at a hotel, and they're going to live there as well as work there. But it turns out that the owner of the hotel is not super on the up and up. I know that's not great phrasing. He's not a great person. He basically is working them to the bone, and they're not getting a living wage. And Mia sort of starts working at the hotel to help out her parents. She takes over front desk duty, and she implements all of these changes that she thinks will help the business. And of course there's pushback from not just her parents, but from people who don't expect, you know, a 10-year-old to be running the front desk, and from the corrupt-ish owner of the hotel. And Mia is also struggling a bit in school because her family immigrated from China and her English is not the best yet, but she wants to be a writer. So it's about all of these things, and you know, it has a very uplifting ending, and there are 2 more books in the trilogy following Mia as her family continues to deal with living in California during the 90s and running a hotel and some other issues that come up with that. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Baraka Beats, and I am sorry I completely forget who the author is, but again, I will have a picture of the book up here, or maybe up here, and the author will be there, and I'm so sorry for forgetting. But this book is super fun about a band. I want to say a boy band, but it's not really a boy band because the main character is a girl and she sort of gets invited to be in this band with them because she will add something unique to the band. And they are, I believe, all Muslim. The main character is definitely Muslim, but I believe everyone in the band is Muslim as well. And part of this is like her struggle with her faith and whether to participate in this because she has sort of grown up believing that music isn't a part of her faith, or secular music maybe isn't a part of her faith. So it's sort of about that struggle, but it's also just like really fun dynamic between the kids in the band and their journey toward participating in, I think it's a talent show. Again, like I said, some of these I read a while ago and I don't remember all of the details, but I do remember that this was an amazing book, and even though I did not do a great job of describing it, I still really recommend that you check it out. Next I want to talk about Eva Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch by Julia Abe. And gosh, this was just the cutest fantasy book ever. I don't know anything about Kiki's delivery service, but I've heard it compared to that a lot, and people get really excited about that. So if you are a fan of Kiki's delivery service, then definitely you will want to check out this one. I'm trying to remember how basically Eva Evergreen has always had like kind of weak magic, and something happens, and there's some conflict between her family and another family, and so basically she agrees to like do these 3 tasks to become like a full witch, and one of the tasks is you have to go live in another town and like help them with something. And things go wrong from the very beginning and she ends up not in the town she's supposed to, but like it's a super cute story about her figuring out her magic and really getting to know the townspeople, and it's so cute, but it's also good, and there's like a good conflict. Yeah, again, just because I've done a poor job describing it, please don't use that as an opportunity not to read it, because if you like, it's just sort of like very whimsical fantasy. Like if you do like Studio Ghibli stuff, again, that's not really my thing, but everyone who I've heard talk about it says like it is that, and so if that's your thing, definitely read Eva Evergreen's Semi-Magical Witch. Next is Some Places More Than Others by Renee Watson, and this is another one set in New York City, specifically Harlem, which again was my old stomping ground when I lived in New York. And the main character in this book, I believe, goes to spend some time with her family in New York. She's not actually from there. And so part of it is getting to know these family members, and there's some conflict, I believe, between her and the cousins who are near her age, maybe about like not being really from there and like the difference between tourists and native New Yorkers, but there's also like a mystery for her to solve about why some of her family members no longer get along with other ones and why there's been a rift between them for so long. So in addition to going to New York and experiencing it for the first time, she's also trying to figure out this mystery and maybe like bring her family back together. So all of those good like contemporary conflicts type things with, of course, the background of New York City, which is always wonderful in my opinion. Then we have Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen. Again, I am forgetting the author's name, but I will have the book cover up here. And I love this book so much. Again, there is a great voice. It's a unique story because it is told entirely in letters. So the main character of this book, she is autistic, and she also loves to play baseball. And she has sort of, in addition to going to normal school, she has sort of like a social skills teacher who gives her different tasks, and one of the things she has to do is write a letter to someone. I don't remember if it has to be someone famous, but she writes a letter to this baseball player. There is some connection between them that I don't remember right now. Maybe she's learning to throw a knuckleball and he is a knuckleball pitcher, I think. And he writes back, and they start this like really sweet email relationship. And so the book is told entirely in emails between the two of them, and it's just really wonderful. She's another character who has a really great voice, and I love seeing the sort of realistic struggles between what she wants to achieve in her life and like how her parents feel about making sure that she stays safe, because she does have autism and isn't always treated the same as other kids. So that's all really great. It's also really funny. So again, and a female athlete. Again, you can see sort of the trends of things that I like in my books. So if you haven't heard of Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen, then definitely I would add that to your TBR as well. Okay, next up is Dragon Warrior by Katie Zhao. And this is another one that I think is really great if you are a fan of anything in the Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan Presents realm, which I know covers a lot these days, because it has that sort of mythological aspect of it and quest aspect that are really great. So the main character of this book and her brother, they're part of this community that is responsible for like keeping, I don't remember if it's demons, but like keeping their neighborhood safe. And there are, of course, supernatural creatures in this universe. So something happened with their family, and they're sort of treated as second-class citizens within this magical community until something happens, and there's something going on with the gods, and they're like gathering in this mythological island, and there needs to be a quest to find them to determine who is this like special, I don't want to say magical, but someone who has a great deal of power. So the main character and her brother, they embark on a quest to find the gods, and it takes them to lots of interesting places, as is always the case. You know, there's lots of action, there's some near-death experiences, there are the secondary characters with lots of personality, and you know, the not so great people from their community who try to thwart them. So it has all of those sort of classic elements of a quest story. But you know, it also has the Chinese mythology side of things, which makes it a bit unique. So I really loved that one, and think that it's a great choice if you are, again, one of those people who has read everything that Rick Riordan has already written, and you need something new. Dragon Warrior is the book for you. Next we have The Only Black Girls in Town by Brandy Colbert. Brandy Colbert is an author who, no matter what she writes, I will read it. Like, I have read every single book she has written, all of her YA, her middle grade, and the most recent nonfiction that she wrote. The Only Black Girls in Town was fantastic. So this one girl is living in a small town in California, and at the time, she is the only black girl there. And then across the street, she gets new neighbors, another black girl and her mom move in. they're sort of renovating this old hotel and getting it up and running again. And they're sort of pushed together because they are the only black girls in town, but they are very, very different. However, then one day they're like going through some stuff in the attic of the hotel and they discover these like journal entries, and so now they're really brought together because they have this mystery to solve about some of the people who used to own and work in the hotel. And so it is at its heart a contemporary story about friendship, but there's also that like side plot of mystery that like just makes things a little bit deeper and more interesting. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, I definitely recommend The Only Black Girls in Town. Whew, I should have brought a cup of water over here. I feel like my voice is getting a bit scratchy. Pause and go get a drink. Okay, I'm back. I have some water. Let's finish the second, we're more than halfway through. So we are getting there. Next up is The Great Green Heist by Varian Johnson. When The Parker Inheritance came out, it was getting so much hype, and I am not saying that it's a bad book, because it's not, but I am saying that if I had to recommend to you one Varian Johnson middle grade book, it would absolutely be The Great Green Heist, because it is hilarious. So the main character, he has been like a prankster for his whole life, and he is sort of reformed these days. He, you know, is on the straight and narrow, he's a member of the gardening club, all of this stuff. He doesn't want to live that prankster life until it seems like some of his classmates are planning to basically steal the election for the president of, I don't remember if it's their class or the student body, but steal this student election. And the other candidate is his ex-girlfriend who he sort of wronged in his prankster days. So he puts together this team to make sure that the election isn't stolen. And the relationship between the characters is funny. Like, the book itself is funny, and like justice being served to corrupt student politicians is always wonderful. So again, I will say, Parker Inheritance, great. Lots of people talking about it. If you want a Varian Johnson novel that is hysterical, get The Great Green Heist. Okay, next up is Midsummers Mayhem by Rajani LaRocca. She, again, I feel like has been getting a lot of buzz lately because her book Red, White, and Whole just won a Newbery honor. And again, you can pick that one up if you want, but I loved Midsummers Mayhem. And I pretty much will read any book that has baking as part of its plot, and this one does. And the main character, she is a baker, and she finds out that this new bakery in town is having this baking competition, and of course she wants to be a part of it. But there's also something like off with the new bakery in town. She can't really figure out what exactly it is, but like something's off. And after her dad eats something from the bakery, something is off with him too, and he basically becomes like a totally different person. So she's like trying to figure all of this out, and also trying to figure out what to enter in the baking competition. And she also like has these woods by her house, and she goes in, she like is in a part that she has sort of never seen before that seems to have trees that would never grow in Massachusetts, and she meets this person who she's never seen before, and like as things progress there might be something weird about him and his connection to the bakery as well. So it's got like whimsical fantasy elements. As Midsummers Mayhem, you can tell it's sort of loosely reminiscent of Midsummer Night's Dream, in that it has that like whimsical fairy type mischief in it. So if you like any of those elements, I thought that it was a fantastic read, and I definitely think Midsummer's Mayhem doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. Then we have Keep It Together, Kiko Carter. and again, I am completely blanking on the author's name. I'm pretty sure her first name is Debbie, but I can't remember her last name. And again, this one I read a really long time ago, and I remember it being really funny and having a really great voice, but I don't remember all of the details, except I think that there is like a trio of friends and there's some conflict in the friend group, and it's sort of that kind of very common tween, like some girls are ready to talk about boys and some aren't, but I don't remember exactly. Either way, I know this is a terrible recommendation, but I promise, like, it's really great. It's not really like girl drama and romance and all of that. It's like, it's really good. It's funny. It's got a good voice, and I apologize for not being able to give you more information about the plot, but I still recommend it and really enjoyed it. Then we have Stand Up Yumi Chung. Jessica Kim, is that the author? I really should have looked these things up. Okay. I'm going to look on Goodreads right now since I do have my laptop in front of me. Why did I not think of that ahead of time? Okay, Stand Up Yumi Chung is written by Jessica Kim, so I did remember that one. Keep It Together, Kigo Carter is written by Debbie Michiko Florence. And Baraka Beats, which I said before, is written by Maliha Siddiqui. Okay, I think that's everyone who I did not give credit to author-wise. So again, I apologize. Back to talking about Stand Up Yumi Chung. So the main character, Yumi, she wants nothing more than to be a stand-up comedian, and she like studies YouTube comedian routines and like videos about being a comic, and she writes her own comic like stand-up routines, and it's really, really great. Her parents want her to do this like, I think, test prep course to make sure that she gets into some elite school. But she like stumbles into this stand-up comedy camp one day, and she is mistaken for a girl who didn't actually show up. And she sort of like goes along with it and pretends to be that girl, and is sort of going to this stand-up comedy camp for or under false pretenses. And meanwhile, like, things are also going on with her parents' restaurant, and it's not doing so well, and they're trying to figure out like how to keep it running. So there's financial pressure, and that has to do with like her academic maybe it's that she needs to get a scholarship. Anyway, the main point is eventually her little deception is uncovered and things sort of fall apart, and we need to see where things go from there. So of course, Yumi wants to be a stand-up comedian. This book is funny. As you can tell, I really like the funny books, but it also has like lots of other great contemporary elements too. The strong family and the struggles between, you know, wanting to do what your parents want for you and wanting to follow your own path and all of that. Okay, A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, which is by Kelly Armstrong. Yes, Kelly Armstrong. So this is another fantasy book that I just really, really loved. So in the kingdom that the main characters live in, one person becomes like the leader of the kingdom, and the other person becomes the royal monster slayer, monster hunter, I don't remember the title. And the main characters are twins, and one of them was born like, because one of them was born a minute before the other one, they are being groomed to become the queen, while the brother is being groomed to become the monster slayer, and both of them would rather be in other roles. And so even though the main character is being groomed to be queen. She like goes with her aunt to hunt monsters whenever she can, and something comes up where like she's trying to prove that she should be the monster slayer instead of the queen, and her brother should really be the king, or something to that effect. And basically she ends up having to go on this impossible quest to slay a monster, but things are not what they seem, and like, is it really a monster, and does it really need to be slain, and all of that. And there is more like violence and tragedy than I expected, but it just was like a really interesting book that like I feel like it was something I hadn't read before. A concept that was different and unique, and again, I really liked the voice of the main character. I also really liked all of the magical creatures. There's one magical creature that like oh, hello. You may have noticed that I sort of abruptly cut myself off when I was talking about the last book that I was reading, or the last book that I was recommending. You may also notice that I am now wearing different clothing, and the lighting is different. That is because when I started editing this video, I realized that it did not record the last six books I wanted to share with you. Now I realized that I could have just made it a 19 middle grade books to recommend video instead of nice, satisfying 25. But here I am, re-recording the information about the last 5 books I wanted to share, 6 books I wanted to share with you, because I gotta do it. So anyway, I was talking to you about the book A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, and I was saying that it was a great fantasy novel with lots of interesting mythical creatures, and you should definitely read it. And now I want to tell you about The Bested It by Malika Pancholi. And this is another contemporary about a boy who is just starting, I believe, 7th grade, and he kind of doesn't know like where his place in the world is and where he fits in. So his grandfather tells him to pick one thing and be the best at it. And so that starts a little bit of a like quest to figure out what his one thing will be. And he tries playing soccer and it does not go well. There's maybe some injuries involved, or at least he feels like injury is imminent. And he wants to be an actor, so he auditions for a commercial, and then turns out that the people running the commercial are like a wee bit racist, and so that doesn't work out either. And then he finally finds what he thinks is going to be his place on the math team, or mathletes. I don't remember what it's called exactly. Things seem to be going well, but there's still like other stuff going on in the background, and just when he thinks he's found his place, everything seems to fall apart. And along with that, he's also trying to figure out, like, he's having particular feelings about another person in his grade, and he's sort of trying to figure out, like, if he likes that person as more than a friend or not. So there's a lot of good middle school coming of age stuff, and there's plenty of humor as well, which you know I'm a fan of if you listen to me ramble about the first 19 books on this list. So anyway, that's The Bested It. Next, I want to talk about Clipped by Tamara Ireland Stone. This one came out a couple of years ago, and when I read it, I thought it was so great, but I honestly don't think I've heard anyone else talk about it in terms of middle grade they love. And maybe I just am not, listening to the right people. But either way, the main character in this book, I think her name is Allie. She is like a little tech genius, app creating wizard. She's wonderful. She went to a coding camp over the summer, and she created this very cool app that like matches you with another person, and then you go on a scavenger hunt together. So it's sort of like friendship finder and game in one. And so she tells her best friends about it, and they like are so enthusiastic that they sort of kind of peer pressure her into like releasing it to the school a little bit sooner than she's ready for. Like I think she hasn't done like a full round of beta testing or something. But she does it, and it like catches on like wildfire, it goes viral, and she's super excited about that. But then she discovers that there is a glitch that could potentially have privacy implications, and she, like, first of all, is horrified, and second of all, needs to figure out how to fix it like really fast before this competition that she wants to enter, and it means she may have to team up with this boy she's always thought of as her nemesis in order to make that happen. And so, like, we love a girls in STEM story, of course, but it's more than that. Like, it was just, honestly, a middle grade story that I feel like I haven't seen before. So I really did like the STEM app creation aspect of it, and honestly, I would really like an app like that where I meet a new friend and we get to do a scavenger hunt. So could someone make that for adults, please? And it's just like her problem solving process and opening herself up to the idea that maybe her nemesis isn't actually her nemesis. Like, all of that is really great. Okay, next up, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. There are 4 books left that I want to talk about. They're all contemporaries, shocker. Next is The First Rule of Punk by Celia Perez. And this is about a girl named Malou. And Malou and her mom have just moved to a new city. And Malou is kind of having a rough go of things. Just as she starts at her new school, she manages to make the main popular girl mad, and a whole bunch of other stuff seems to go wrong. And unfortunately, her dad is no longer living with her and her mom. He's now hundreds of miles away. But he tells her that she just needs to be herself. And so she like gets into zine making, and she starts a band, and she stands up to the authoritarian administration at her school. So she's just got a lot of personality and spunk, Malou. And a fair amount of the backdrop of this book is, I can't remember if it's a restaurant or a record store, but like some place of business, and the business owner has a child who's also around Malou's age, and so like there's some of that friendship as well. So again, I feel like a broken record a little bit. It is one of those good like coming of age, figuring out who you are, middle grade stories, which the best of them are that, really. But First Rule of Punk by Celia Perez is definitely a good one. Okay, next is Lions and Liars by Kate Beasley. And I know that you have heard me talk about many funny books on this list, but please, please trust me when I say that this book is laugh out loud, in public, hysterical. So the main character in this book has a bit of a wild ride because he's not having a great time in life. Things are going wrong. He's supposed to go on vacation with his family, and his vacation gets canceled because of a pending hurricane. So he ends up going to this kid's birthday party, and like bad things keep happening at the birthday party, and finally this one kid like teases him about not getting to go on the cruise, and finally he's had enough, and so he gets in that family's boat, and he's like going to pretend to sail away, but in fact he does actually sail away. I don't remember, maybe he like falls asleep in the boat and it like drifts away. I don't remember exactly, but somehow he washes ashore on the banks of this camp for troubled boys. And upon showing up there, expecting to be able to like find someone to help him get home, he's mistaken for one of the campers, and he ends up in this like disciplinary camp for the weekend. And that's not, gonna go well, because his new like campmates are a little bit terrifying. And remember that hurricane that's coming up? Well, it's gonna hit the camp, and so they all have to sort of band together to figure out a way to survive this hurricane. So I would say that, you know, it does require a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but it's hysterical, and I definitely would add it to your TBR if you haven't read it yet. Next we have The Truth About Twinkie Pie by Kat Lay, and this came out a couple of years ago. Like, I feel like I read it a while ago, and honestly it was before I had really gotten into middle grade, but I really enjoyed it. And so the main character in this book, she lives with her older sister, and they have recently won a large sum of money. The sister, I believe, won a baking competition, and that spurs her to move them from like their rural southern town to this more like ritzy, fancy Long Island neighborhood. And so the main character has to deal not just with like moving to a new location, but also starting a new school that's sort of elite and filled with maybe some kind of snobby kids. And so she's sort of trying to figure out why all this is going on, why like their old home wasn't good enough, how to fit in at this new school. And there's something going on with her sister too, like maybe something's not quite right and she's not getting all the information she needs about what their relationship truly is. And so it has just a lot of different elements. I, of course, love anything that has baking or food themes throughout, as I have mentioned before in this very video. And I just think this is another one that was more quiet, didn't get a ton of attention, but is definitely worth a read, especially if you are another person like me who reads a lot of contemporary books in any age group. Okay, we are at the final book on this very long list in this very long video that has taken 2 different occasions to get everything filmed. Hopefully, I will not discover when I go to edit this portion that it also did not record. The last book on my list of favorite middle grades is honestly really the only thing that could be considered a quote-unquote classic, and that is Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Paterson, which I read as an actual middle grade aged person. Most of these I read as an adult librarian, but this one I loved as a kid, and when I taught 4th grade, I read it to my class, and I continue to love it as an adult. Of course, it also continues to break my heart into a million pieces as an adult, just as it did when I was a child. And if you are not the type of person who wants to be like overcome with like whole body sobs, you should not read this book. But if you like unlikely friendships and girls kicking boys' butts and smashing the patriarchy and imagination, then those are all reasons to read Bridge to Terabithia. Also, if you are a grown-up watching this video and you haven't read this, why the heck not? I'm kidding. I do not judge. You read what you want, but honestly, like, a lot of books I don't feel age that well, and honestly, I haven't read this in a couple of years, and it's very possible that if I read it again today, now that I've had almost a decade of experience as a librarian and I really pay a lot more attention to the content of books and whether they're problematic and how they deal with race and class and sex and all of those things, maybe it won't hold up. Maybe I should not be including it on this video, but as of right now, in my mind, I still believe that it is one of my favorite middle grade books. And that is where I'm going to end for today. I know I didn't give a lot of information about Bridge to Terabithia, but I feel like it's hard to talk about without spoiling things. So I'm not going to say a lot more, but it's been out for a really long time, so it's really easy to find out the plot. Anyway, those are my 25 favorite middle grade books. I hope that this video has given you some ideas of books you might want to pick up soon, especially if you are also participating in middle grade March like I am. If you want to leave a comment below sharing your favorite middle grade book, or books, if you want to leave a whole list, even 25, that's totally fine. I would love to see it. Otherwise, I will talk to you soon.